Hello everyone, let's discuss today's The Hindu editorial page. The first article is The Global Nuclear Order is Under Strain. In this article, the writer says that the Global Nuclear Order, GNO, was established in the aftermath of the Cold War, with the US and the USSR leading the Western and Socialist blocs respectively. Following the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, US President John F. Kennedy and General Secretary Nikita Khrushchev understood the need for bilateral mechanisms to prevent tensions from escalating to the nuclear level and to curb the spread of nuclear weapons. This convergence created the GNO. During the Cuban crisis, a secret back channel between President Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy, and Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin helped resolve the crisis. The first bilateral measure was the Hotline, established in 1963 to enable leaders to communicate directly. The Hotline later upgraded into nuclear risk reduction centers. The second element of the global nuclear order came into existence in 1975 when India conducted an underground peaceful nuclear explosive, PNE. 7 countries, the US, USSR, UK, Canada, France, Japan, and West Germany, held meetings in London and concluded that ad hoc export controls were urgently needed to ensure that nuclear technology, transferred for peaceful purposes, not be used for PNEs. The GNO has held reasonably well, particularly on 2 fronts. The taboo against nuclear weapons has held since 1945, and non-proliferation has been a success. Despite dire predictions of more than 20 countries possessing nuclear weapons by the 1970s, only 4 countries have since gone nuclear. That is, India, Israel, North Korea, and Pakistan. Even after the Cold War ended, non-proliferation remained a shared objective, and Moscow and Washington cooperated to ensure that Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan that hosted Soviet nuclear weapons were denuclearized. Arms control did not end the US-USSR nuclear race. Their arsenals grew from 28,000 bombs in 1962 to over 65,000 bombs in the early 1980s. Since the late 1980s, the US and Soviet arsenals have declined sharply to below 12,000 bombs today. These understandings of nuclear deterrence in a bipolar world outlasted the Cold War, but are under question. The nuclear world is no longer a bipolar one, with the US facing a more assertive China, determined to regain influence regionally and globally. This rivalry differs from the Cold War due to their closely intertwined economies and China's economic and technological peer rivalry. China has resentment towards the US's naval presence in the South China and East China Seas and has steadily built up its naval and missile capabilities since the last Taiwan Strait crisis in 1996. Changing geopolitics has taken a toll on the US-Russia relations, with the only remaining agreement, New START, set to lapse in 2026. Strategic stability talks began in 2021 but collapsed with the Ukraine war. Russia de-ratified the CTBT to bring it on par with the US, raising concerns about the resumption of nuclear testing. As US relations with Russia go into a nosedive, the US faces a new situation of 2 nuclear peer rivals exploring new roles for more usable weapons. The Cold War convergence on non-proliferation has run its course, and nuclear weapons technology is a 75-year-old technology. The US has always had a pragmatic streak shaping its policy approaches, turning a blind eye to Israel's nuclear program and China's assistance to Pakistan. Recent opinion polls indicate a 70% support for developing a national nuclear deterrent and 40% for reintroducing US nuclear weapons on its territory. The next article is an India out plan that could impact the Maldives. In this article, the writer says that the Maldives' decision to revoke an agreement with India for joint hydrographic surveys in the Indian waters has caused significant dissatisfaction in Indian media and strategic circles. The pact, signed during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the islands in 2019, was seen as a symbol of India-Maldivian defense ties. However, the Maldives move came after New Delhi formally asked the archipelagic state to withdraw its Indian military presence from its shores. The Maldives would like the world to believe that terminating the hydrography pact is a way of asserting its autonomy and agency. However, it is not. Far from balancing ties with India, the Maldives has thrown in its political lot with China. The Mitsu administration's refusal to renew the hydrography pact seems less to do with the president's sensitivities about sovereignty than with his special relationship with Beijing. Getting Indian hydrographic ships out of the Maldives appears intended to aid China's marine surveys of the surrounding seas. Hydrographic data inherently has a dual nature, as the information collected from the seas can be used for civilian and military purposes. Marine scientists maintain that the data that helps advance non-military objectives, such as ensuring navigational safety, marine scientific research, and environmental monitoring, can also be used to facilitate military aims, such as surveillance of a nation's vital coastal installations and warfare assets. China is unique in using its marine and seabed surveys to advance a largely strategic agenda. The country has an extensive oceanographic research program in which scientific research vessels are regularly deployed in the Indian Ocean. Their presence goes largely unnoticed, eclipsed by China's growing naval footprint. For China, marine surveys and reconnaissance are critical enablers of the People's Liberation Army Navy's maritime strategy in the far seas. Indian observers point out that China's ocean surveys play an important part in enhancing its anti-submarine warfare capabilities. The mapping of the ocean's temperature profile and studying other oceanic phenomena, such as currents and eddies, is meant to improve sonar performance and detection of enemy submarines. Studying the marine environment also aids in the development of systems that help Chinese submarines evade detection and fine-tune tactics for littoral combat. However, China's oceanographic surveys in the waters of friendly South Asian states are potentially hindered by the presence of Indian hydrographic ships in the area. The next article is faulty compulsion. Issues with Aadhaar seeding are a headache for MGNREG's beneficiaries. In this article, the writer says that the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, MGNREGs, has been forced to extend the deadline for Aadhaar details of workers to be added to their job cards beyond December 31st, 2023, to enable payments through an Aadhaar-based payment system, ABPS. This decision affects nearly 35% of job card holders and 12.7% of active workers, putting a dampener on the demand-driven scheme for many. The union government claims that ABPS implementation will ensure quick, secure payments and reduce rejection. However, over-reliance on technical tools has resulted in problematic implementation, with beneficiaries lacking proper recourse for corrections. Data analysis by LibTech India suggests that 7.6 crore workers' names have been deleted over the past 21 months due to discrepancies between the Aadhaar and the job card. There are also issues with the use of ABPS, such as errors in any step of the process leading to payment failures. The government claims that ABPS has reduced wage delays due to inadequate funds in the first place. The union government must revisit this decision and work out a way to correct the faulty seeding and mapping problems before imposing ABPs. The Ministry of Rural Development may consider an exemption from ABPS on a case-by-case basis for Gram Panchayats if there are technical issues. MGNREGs remains a vital demand-driven welfare scheme that helps the rural poor, and its implementation must not be dependent on a faulty technological system. The next article is growth signals. The indirect tax intake might be a bonanza despite some momentum loss. In this article, the writer says that the goods and services tax, GST, in India has yielded close to Rs 165 lakh crore in gross revenues in the last month of 2023. This is the 8th occasion in this fiscal year that GST revenues were over Rs 1.6 lakh crore. the first 9 months of 2023 to 24 have seen a 12% rise in GST collections, with the monthly intake averaging Rs 66 lakh crore from Rs 49 lakh crore in 2022 to 23. There is a good chance that the tax, which was often lamented, has not delivered as much revenue as anticipated at the time of its launch. The Reserve Bank of India's projection was for growth to taper off from 7.7% in the first half of the year to 6.5% in the October to December 2023 quarter and further to 6% in the current quarter. December's GST collections for transactions indicated some moderation in momentum already. The headline number and growth rate for December were the lowest in 3 months, with a 10.3% growth rate being weaker than the 15.1% recorded a month earlier. The government has emphasized resilient domestic consumption to steer the economy amid global headwinds, with indicators such as car sales crossing the 4 million mark in 2023. Policymakers must note the slowing pace while factoring in the additional inflation that seems set to exceed expectations.